night. They scored, what, 2 shorthanded goals last night, including the last one when they chipped the puck out of the zone and took a penalty when they were shorthanded already. So it was 6-on-3, and they scored an open net goal. So I don't know. They got a lot of things going right for them suddenly, and to tie back into what I think you guys were talking about was overplaying players. When Parisi and Suter were at Minnesota, those guys were, Suter was getting 28 to 32 minutes a night, which means that's 10 extra shifts that other guys can't play. And now they play their top 3 lines more than the fourth, but the fourth line scores goals too for the Wild. So finally we have a team we can maybe be proud of, and will do something in the playoffs. So,
well, I didn't watch a lot of the game, but I watched enough to share this observation. I think they were up 2-1, and they got a penalty, and it was sort of like a hitting from behind. And to me, it was very questionable penalty. Like, the guy was quite a ways from the boards. Contact was made. He did fall. He did crash into the boards, but it looked like it was just a safe thing, except in the area that it was called.
Down by the net.
Yeah, and I think you might remember it.
Yep, for sure.
Now, the camera panned the bench. This is what I got out of it. The head coach, he was shaking his head with a smile on his face. Like, he wasn't losing it, screaming and yelling. And just after that, they scored a goal, shorthanded. That's when I refer to the coaching in the future, there's an example of the coach on the bench has got his crap together. He knows anything he's going to say or do. He didn't lose it upstairs, and the players didn't lose it on the ice. So kudos to him for not, reacting in what I thought was a brilliant way. So
two things, Wally. Number one, Dean is probably as good a person as there is in hockey. I had the Minnesota coach. I had him as a teammate in Hartford one year. Terrific person. Second thing is, for me, there are no borderline checking from behind penalties. If it's even close, it's a penalty.
Yeah. No, I'm not arguing about the penalty. It's just that there was absolutely no intention of injury. It just happened that he lost contact. If there hadn't have been that, the contact made was enough to make him lose his edge to go into the boards. It wasn't that he was really strong and stable and could avoid it. But it was a penalty. There's no doubt about it. But my point is, the way he reacted to it is the way coaches have to be able to react to it.
Oh yeah.
And if coaches take that call and react to it the wrong way, they're not coaching. They're out of the moment of the game. So I want to welcome Sami Joe.
Recent champion, Sami Joe.
Sami, tell us a bit about what you just accomplished and a little bit about the ups and downs of being able to do that. Go ahead, Sami.
Well, that's a massive question, Wally, but thank you. Thank you to everybody on this call. First off, Tim, thank you for coming to the game.
It was great.
I'm sad I didn't get to see you in person, but I'm so glad you got to experience it. Yeah, what did you think of the game?
It was a really good, entertaining game. As I mentioned to you, I was sitting with Steve Baker, who's a teammate from the Rangers and New Haven. He's a goalie. His son, Steve Jr., is also a goalie. So I was getting the goalie perspective. But Steve's an executive with the new 3-on-3 league. Last year was their first season. It's called 3 Ice. And they run in the summertime. And so Steve, well, both of them had really not seen much women's hockey at all. So I was trying to give them some perspective on the background of the players, and certainly mentioned that the caliber play was very good, but they're missing all of the Olympic players, which at some point we hope everybody can get together on the female side and have all the best players in one league. It would be tremendous. But it was a very entertaining game, well played, exciting back and forth, and nice little crowd there in Tempe. It was really good.
Yeah, I was impressed with the crowd considering they had basically 2 weeks of planning. So I would say they probably got, what would you say, Tim, like 1,200 maybe?
That's exactly sort of the area, 12 or 1,500 that I thought. I was thinking, geez, if they could have had it in Toronto, for instance, like, what could they have done with that 2-week marketing push,
Yeah, so we hosted the semis in Toronto.
Yeah.
With exactly that 2 weeks that they told us. So the whole year has sort of been like that in that we have a new commissioner, Reagan Carey. She's incredible. She used to run USA Hockey, the women's program. And her coming in really has changed things and elevated things. But it also means that, and me coming in as well, we're kind of all flying by the seat of our pants a little bit as you're planning, because you're like so into that planning mode, and then you're into the next planning mode of the next planning mode.
Yeah.
So they knew a couple months prior that the final was going to be at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on a Sunday night. And that was the first thing that they knew they could get it on linear. So then realizing you can't really put an East Coast game 9 p.m. and get crowd.
Yeah.
So they figured that they would get a neutral site game, and then started working with some of the NHL clubs on the East or the West Coast to try to get that. So I thought the Tempe venue was perfect for women's hockey. I mean, how great would that be to have a full-time team there? That'd be incredible. I'm not sure that it's probably great for NHL hockey. The girls tried to get tickets for the game the next day, but Connor McDavid was playing, so the games were sold out. And I think it only seats about, what would you say, Tim, like 5,000?
Yeah, I think it's 5 or 55, something like that. Yeah.
But quite a venue. I mean, that venue is really state of the art for that size, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's very nice.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah,
was impressed.
That was impressive. But yeah, so getting to hear that Tim went to the game, that meant a lot. So thank you, Tim. And then I don't know if everybody knows that I got to meet Hal in person probably about a month ago, when we finished our season playing against Minnesota in Minnesota. Unfortunately, I think lines got crossed, and I think I either gave Hal the wrong time of the game, or he got the wrong time of the game, but we ended up at the wrong time. And so he didn't actually get to see the game, but he came to the restaurant after, because we had like 3 hours before we had to get on the plane. So that actually probably was better, because then I got to sit and hang out with him, which was really special. So that was a different Minnesota team than we faced in the final. That Minnesota team, they have 3 girls on the U.S. national team, and they had just come off the rivalry series, so they were really exhausted. They didn't play well. Their starting goalie, Amanda Leveille, she's 2-time goalie of the year, and she was out on long-term injury reserve. So I didn't think she would even come back for the playoffs, but she was back. She was able to beat the Boston team, which had really kind of steamrolled over everybody the entire season. The Boston team has 2 girls from our national team. And anyways, and they had a goalie that had 7 shutouts throughout the year, but Minnesota came in and beat them with their U.S. players and their great goaltending. So we knew it wasn't going to be easy going into the final, and we were going to face a different Minnesota team. But our team, I feel like, just never really had quit. We didn't do things the conventional way, or make things easy for coaches, or make things easy for administrators. But it made it for really entertaining games for fans. We often had to claw back from games. And this was no different. It was tied 2-2 going into the third, and then we went down 3-2. And they came back and they won it. And our girl that scored in overtime, Teresa Venesova, plays on the Czech national team, plays for Karla, played for Thomas. And we have 2 Czech national team players on our team. So those girls partied well into the night and then had to be at training camp the next day. So their flight left at 5 a.m. to get to the Czech team. I think they were training in Whitby leading up to the Brampton Worlds. So, but really special for her. Teresa Venesova has actually won the Isabel Cup 3 years in a row. So she was with Boston the last 2 years and then came to our team and won it with our team. So that was special. So yeah, overall the experience was amazing. Anybody that's been on the administrative side of hockey knows just how many hours it takes, and it was way more work than I anticipated, because there is no end to the work. And I think that when you're so passionate about something like this, it's really hard to stop. It's really hard to shut down at night. I had to really make a conscious effort every single day to be present for my daughter when she got off the bus. So that was my time with her, would be getting up in the morning. So I would get up early before she woke up, do about an hour, then be there to make her lunch and get her on the bus and be with her for that 45 minutes, and then have her whole school day. Make sure from 4 to 7 I was there for her and my husband, who was doing a gargantuan duty of all of the other things that I normally do. And then work another 3 hours into the night and then try to get some sleep. And it just, every weekend got better for our team in terms of the amount of people that came to the games. And then we finished with that final series in Toronto. We got to play at TMU, which was really great, thanks to Lisa Haley, and had 1,500 people at 3 straight games. We lost the first game, won the second in overtime, dramatic fashion, and then won the third game. And with so many fans in the crowd, I think that weekend of hockey for me really changed the landscape of women's professional hockey in this country. I think it showed a lot of people that what we have within the PHF is a really strong infrastructure, a great product on the ice. Tim, you're right, the Olympians are not there, but it's still all these players that have played under 22, under 18 national teams, and some really strong hockey. And that, you know, they've been at it for 8 years. I've only been doing this for 1, but they've been at it for 8 years. And it, you know, there's always hiccups along the way that you learn every single weekend how to get better at putting on a on-ice product, because really it's entertainment when it comes to professional hockey at this point. So it's everything else between whistles, between before and after the game for the fans, and all of that. So yeah, I'm talking a million miles an hour because I'm still really excited that we won. But I thought there would be a break when we got back, but because you win, you now have to plan all these parties. So we're having a huge party on Saturday at our home venue where all the fans are coming out. And then we're going to the Leafs game. They're going to honor us there. The girls are throwing out the opening pitch at the Blue Jays game. And they're going to be at City Hall on Friday. So got to plan all of those things before I start the World Championships on Monday, which I'm working for TSN, which is going to be great, and doing 29 games in 14 days, I think. So super fun. But,
Sami,
yes.
Sami, maybe the Leafs should sign a few of your girls, get a little championship pedigree in the lineup.
Right. So I think the best part about the whole experience was Bernice Carnegie is a part owner of our organization. And Bernice, for anybody that's ever met Bernice, her father went into the Hockey Hall of Fame recently, but she is just an incredible lady with just this amazing backstory, but just this amazing sense of perspective as well, and this positivity that exudes her. And so I think I had some discussions with this group about, you know, tough coaches, players disgruntled throughout the season, all of that. And a week before we left, I had Bernice come and chat with the players and just give a real sense of gratitude for where they are and what they're doing, and all of the shoulders that they are standing on to be in this position here, and all those that you can uplift along the way. So that was really positive. It was amazing. And then in the end, we decided to bring Bernice with us down to Tempe. So the little group of staff members that we had traveling everywhere from college kids up to Bernice, we were quite the eclectic crew going down there. But Bernice was giving hugs to the players before they were going on the ice, and they were just so appreciative that she was there. And so having her there, that perspective was amazing. But then Brent Dodging Horse came out to the game as well, who spoke to this group. And Brent from Saskatchewan actually lives in Arizona. He and one of his friends came out, and Brent meeting Bernice was really powerful because both of them working in diversity and inclusion and having this incredible story within the game of not feeling a part of the game. You could see that he just was so appreciative of Bernice and all of that. So that was really great, but also having somebody like Bernice to give that perspective, because it wasn't always an easy year for the players. And, they didn't always feel like the administration or the coaching staff was doing things the way they wanted them to do it. All of you have worked with Geraldine Heaney, who is my head coach, and Angela James, probably some of you guys. They, have a certain way of doing things, and often it takes a little while to warm up to that style of coaching. So having somebody like Bernice there too to kind of soften a lot of it, I think was really helpful.
Oh, your mic, Wally.
Oh, you're on mute, Wally.
Geraldine and just congratulate them, both of them. Geraldine was the girl that was injured during 2002, and we were debating which defenseman to take. Geraldine hadn't played games. She did play just shortly after the Christmas break, but then literally missed the season. And we talked about this in last week's call where we couldn't decide. So we broke down the shifts, scoring chances only of 3 games against Sweden with the 3 players in question. And Geraldine scored plus 32, more than the other 2 candidates. When you looked at the goals for, how they contributed to them, and the goals against, how they might have caused them in some way, shape, or form. So really special person, a great athlete. I really appreciate you, bringing her name up. I just wanted to compliment you and the program and female hockey in general. It's great to see where it's come. I know I've spent most of my season, the biggest satisfaction I get is watching Tom and Wes's U13 teams play in tournaments. It's all relative. The competition is relative. I know that the NHL game is sort of the be all and end all, the public imagery and the market and that kind of thing. But I just discovered that with Tom's team having made a connection with the parents and Tom himself experiencing winning more than most people do in that environment. It's just a wonderful environment. It sure feels good to win, but win the right way. And that's what I wanted to ask you about, Sami.
Wally, Tom's had his hand up. Maybe.
Tom, you go ahead, and then I'll go back to Sami on. I'm
Sure.
looking at coaching, management to transmit belief to get to the point where you did win. Go ahead, Tom.
Well, congratulations, Sami. That's great. You won that.
Thank you.
And talking about the party, in between, we finished off with a tournament, and in between games last Saturday, Cassie and Brad Pascal, they opened a bar, and they make
Like
their
they
own
legit
beer.
opened a bar, or they took over a bar?
No, their own. They took over
They did.
There's an old Army airfield where Mount Royal College is. That's what it was born on or built on, and the old stable there. Everything's a heritage, so you can't really change it. So the stable now is their bar and their
Wow, that's cool.
and they make the beer. We got a tour of all that, and we had our party in their place there, and that was kind of neat. And anyways, I want to tell about some things I observed at the Flames game after this thread of the conversation's over, because we do stats on shots. Or maybe I'll just do it real quick. We do stats on shots. I've got this one mother that does stats on everything and cheers the whole time too. I don't know how she does it. But anyway, we average about in a 45-minute game about 55 passes. So I thought, I'm going to watch the Flames. I'm going to count their completed passes. And they're playing LA and they got clobbered the game before. So in the first period, they made 92 successful passes. Second period, and they had a power play then. Second period, 110. I think they had 2 power plays too that boosted. And they had a 2-1 lead. So they went into a bit of a shell and they were doing that flip out of the zone quite a few times. And LA was really pressing. They made 62 passes. So they made, and then in a game, equal game, each team gets a puck about 21 minutes in a 60-minute game. And so that's like 12 passes a minute they're making when they are on offense. And I just wanted to see that because the comparison between the highest level, and that's the biggest fault in hockey below that level, is people just carry the puck. And that's how we win. We back pressure the puck carrier because we know they're never going to pass. And, I that's the first time I've ever done that. So they made 260 passes in the game, which is 205 more than we make in our good games. So,
Successful passes, Tom, not just
the only completed passes.
Yeah.
How many attempts at the Flames level was there?
Attempts?
Like
I
how
just
many
have
missed
to
passes?
Well, they made 260 that went and the guy caught the pass. They don't miss passes. Sometimes.
Right. So are they only missing like 20 a game or something? Like what's the?
I'll bet you the pucks that hit sticks. I'll bet you there's less than 10 that hit the stick and they don't take them. I think that's the biggest difference, Tim, is the pros. They do not miss passes.
Yeah, it's a big skill we really tried to focus on with the Danish team. Pass reception for sure. But those are very interesting stats, Tom. As you were talking, it'd be really interesting to, and maybe I'm not sure how many of the World Games, the women, I can get access to down here because I still don't have a TV really set up yet. But do the same stats for the Women's World Championship and see where they're at. And I guess with Sami, obviously in the course of a game, even NHL games, there's the odd bad pass that totally misses the mark, or there are some that failed receptions or whatever. And I think that's what Sami was asking. It would be interesting to know kind of how the percentage sort of falls there, like successful versus unsuccessful.
Well, what I did is I push transition, right? Like, because I think we coach the game the wrong way. We coach the game like it's soccer or basketball, like you have the ball forever. But in hockey, the puck turns over team to team about 6-7 times every minute. So your team in a good level of hockey, your team has the puck 180 to 200 times. And the other team, the same thing. If like that game in LA, the shots were 33-33 at the end of the game. It was a pretty even game. And then about 18 minutes, the puck is loose. You're battling for loose pucks and all this kind of stuff. So I think that really influences how we have to coach the game. It's not, Bjorn Kinding said hockey's more like tennis than it is like basketball, because you're going one team to the other all the time. Power plays and that are different. They're more like soccer and basketball, right? But, so that really influences how we have to work on things in a game, is the transition all the time. So that's why I counted the passes. I just was really interested to see if they're better than my U13 team, and they are.
It's a bit of a chicken or the egg too, though, Tom. Like, totally agree that hockey is way more random, way more transitional than soccer, basketball, but also the way we coach affects that transition. And I don't think there's enough emphasis on possession. The NHL teams, they totally focus on fire it up, chip it deep, go chase it. They add to the transition nature of the game because they're afraid of the mistake and the failure. And I think coaching wise, there's more of it now, but there's room for us to emphasize more possession than the vast majority of coaches embrace. It's a space and area game at the NHL level. It's changed a little bit in the last 10 years, but I think there's still room for more possession in the game, even inside the fact that it is a transitional game and a random game.
Oh yeah, with the shrinking the zone and all that, you have to, either go high and across, or, behind the net, side to side and up to spread the defense, because there's no room the cycling in the corner is gone. You can't do that anymore because they've got 4 players against your 3. But yeah, I see a lot more scissors than there used to be. And the other thing that I see is since they moved the blue line out there, I don't know, 10 years ago or something, that's a big area above the circles. And I thought Chicago, when they were really good, was the first one to take advantage of that a lot more. Now all the teams are doing a lot of stuff up high, and a lot of face-off plays and all that up high too.
Yeah, I mean, that's all changed dramatically in the last 10 years to the good, to the positive. I think that what I was talking about, or I meant, maybe didn't say clearly enough, it's more through the neutral zone on attack. There's way more room for emphasis on possession. NHL coaches are deathly locked for the most part in the just gain the space, don't worry about possession mode. And there's some merit to that, of course. But I think we could do a better job of balancing, when you're, like, for instance, when you're approaching the offensive blue line, if you have a little bit of time and space, but you don't have support, instead of just throwing it in and chasing it, why not try, like we all do 3-on-3, why not turn it back, keep possession, and try to reform an attack? There's a bit more room for that, I think, still in, especially at the NHL level, where they're so skilled and they should be able to make those judgments and really minimize turnovers. But anyway.
I'm amazed that at the NHL level, they find any space in the offensive zone.
Yeah.
I mean, whenever, I'm watching women's hockey, the average height is maybe 5'7". So the reach is not, what the guys have. And say guys being 6'2", 6'3", and we play, our home rink is Olympic size ice. Now we play obviously on the NHL a lot rinks, but whenever I watch an NHL game and I go down at rink level and how big the guys are, they just seem like they are taking the entire space. When you put those 10 guys in an offensive zone, how they find any space, that is always so incredible to me. So it makes so much sense, Tim, that you find the space before you enter the zone.
Mm-hmm. And I totally agree. And that exact same thing, when I first started coaching, this would be like 30 years ago now, I was coaching in Medicine Hat. That's a pretty darn good level of hockey, major junior. But, I coached September through December. We had a little break at Christmas. So I went through Calgary to go back home to Vancouver, where Barb was going to school. And I went to a practice, pregame skate, the Flames, they were playing LA. And even coaching in major junior, I went to the practice and I'm like, oh my God. It just like hit me, standing sort of rinkside. Just
how big they all are.
Size and the speed and the, like, that was, but.
Yeah, so I think Tim's frozen for me, but I think it's fascinating, Tom, when you say that there's cycling is gone. You wouldn't say it's gone from the other levels of hockey, would you? I mean, I feel like at our level, it still is certainly there. And when I say
No,
level, I
there
mean
isn't
maybe
much
more
because
size.
they're shrinking the zone, so everybody's in the corner. You're taking away the little pass to the boards and below the net, and they're double teaming. So there's not a lot of room. So you got to get the puck away from that crowd of people, and and that's what they do. They have to put it either high or across to create some space. Other levels of hockey, well, it's just so much faster at the NHL level that other levels you can still cycle and they don't cover as well and stuff like that.
The reach isn't maybe quite the same.
Yep.
Oh yeah, like
Sami,
Calgary's 6'6".
I'm listening to you talk, and I'm really glad that Tom brought up his U13 team and the stats that the mother was keeping. And you brought up the idea, well, gee, there's still cycling at your level. And Tim's talking about the Flames and the possession game. Well, I'm more concerned about the developmental side, and I believe that what Tom did, keeping track of the number of passes, not the just completed passes, valuing the pass. His team possessed the puck because of that. They worked on passing skill. They worked on support, but they did more passing, decision-making type passing in games, competitive small area games that were reflected in practice. Now, in elite hockey, boys hockey, minor hockey, growing up right to the U16, 18 levels, it's 1-on-5. They carry the puck as far as they can. If they make two passes in a row, wow, that's really great in boys hockey. Well, Tom's team, I've seen them make 5 in a row. So that's the essence of the game is to be aware, use one another, and possess the puck. And so what Tom did at that age level, they're going to have to cope with the game as it moves up. And this is where I wanted Hal and Jordan. I don't know if Jordan's still at his desk in the office, but yeah, Jordan's experimented with more of this stuff. I've seen his team, U18 AA, scissor the puck. I've seen them cycle the puck very well, low zone offense. And Hal, I'm wondering how this fits into your conversation. You were talking about possession and turnovers at the blue line in the presentation I accidentally had on my phone when this morning when I woke up, and it was last week's session. But I wonder if you could talk about this, your level, what's working for you, what you did that worked better, and if Jordan's there, just to tie it in. And we will talk a little more, I'm sure, about the NHL level, because I've always said that's the sort of the ultimate level of hockey IQ and skill that you're going to witness, that we're striving for, even with these kids, sooner than later. So, Hal, can you comment a bit?
Sure. I mean, this is so great. This stuff's all right on. With this team I just had, they couldn't make 2 passes in a row, or the puck was rolling when it arrived. With the exception of one kid who thought every pass was a slap shot, and nobody could catch it. And we did, for a while, focus on having somebody track how many passes, successful passes. And the other issue really is catching the dang thing. And the youth players tend to, at least my experience, is they get it off their stick and get it in the general vicinity of where it's supposed to go, and then they think it's that person's responsibility to figure it out when it gets there, and the passer is kind of out of the play. but it's one of those skills things that when you sent that thing out, Wally, about stick length, and I talked to my players about it at our after season party, because some of them in their skates, they have their stick length is up their nose, and these are the kids that can't catch a pass, or if they're defensemen, they can't get the puck out of their feet when they're on the blue line, and the issue of getting the blade flat on the ice and keeping your knees bent. And my experience, and maybe this is not true, Sami, but from coaching girls for a couple of years, they bend their knees a lot more than the boys do. And I don't know why that is. But they're down low a lot, especially the better players. And from my experience, so that was U15.
I wonder if that's just a flexibility thing. I think of somebody like Jennifer Bottrell, who skates so low and has such a powerful stride.
No.
Yeah, you're right. Lots do. I wonder if they've had to do it to generate strength. Like if it's the biomechanics they've had to make up for it, or it is simply as the flexibility that allows them to get it down.
Well, I know a lot of the boys I've coached, their hip flexors are really tight. There's a lot of things they can't do. They can't do mohawks very well. There's just a lot of structural issues that some of the kids have. But the passing thing is so
my
great.
experiential observation would be the opposite, that there's a lot less knee flexing in the female game generally, which I always kind of attributed to, probably in a very general way, not the best players, of course, but a lack of leg strength. But my experience would be the opposite. Not saying I'm right. I'm just saying I have a different sense of it.
Tim, when you brought up, Sami brought up Botterill, she played ringette until grade 12.
That'll do it.
And
sure.
that does it, because the stick length, they're leaning on the stick.
I think hers even more so was her mom was a Olympic speed skater. So I think she learned that lowness. Like Daniel Goyette. Like Goyette, he learned skating from the speed skaters, right? So yeah, incredible strides.
Good skater.
But the passing skills.
Yeah, but I'm just I'm glad we're on this area, because I'm sure we'll get more listeners talking about the NHL and people getting excited about that. But the meat of the matter is, we want to raise the bar of the game, and it starts with kids learning and growing up and doing the right things technically and ethically. And that's what, we're sort of trying to be all about. And I'm really glad for the progress being made in the game. And I just have to mention, Sami, before you joined, I had my phone in my back pocket, it bumped, and all of a sudden I'm listening to last week's Sharks edited sessions. And it's actually quite amazing. And I don't know how many of you have them on your phone, but if you're driving anytime and you just want to listen to anyone, honest to God, it's amazing what all of we come up with in these discussions. Now, they go all over the map, but they are really sort of consummately looking at the nature of the game today, where it is, where it could be, and what we're doing. So these conversations are great. And I do hope Jordan gets on, because he wanted to say hi to Sami again today. And just for everybody here, I wanted to mention.
Jordan is on, Wally.
Hi, Jordan. Jordan has been selected, I think it's called Coach of the Year at his level, and he's going up to the provincials for the awards banquet if he can get a babysitter for his dog, I believe. And I don't know, Jordan, but welcome aboard, Jordan. And I don't know if you heard the conversation we had, but the gist of it is Tom talked about passing, keeping stats, and he's worked on passing and support through thinking in small area games. And I know I've seen the deliberate practice they've done on passing and timing, and it's paid off for him, keeping track of the number of passes. And then we debated that Tom went to the NHL game. He brought up the stats, and it was like maybe the most Tom's team has completed is maybe 45, 50 max.
The most
the
we ever
NHL game,
completed, 66.
Yeah. How many was the NHL game last night? Night before
Well,
last?
they went from 92 first, 110 second, and 62 third.
So that was the point. And then we got talking about Tom mentioned there's no cycling anymore in the NHL. And I mentioned, yeah, you still cycle and you're scissoring, you're experimenting with what they can do at the level they're at.
They scissor more than they cycle. Scissors becoming more popular.
Yeah. So I'm glad you're on, Jordan, because you're what you've done with your team, taking some of the ideas that are going on in the NHL, but what works at your level, what has worked most best for you? Hal has mentioned strictly passing and receiving and catching passes in particular. And I'm just curious, Jordan and Hal, what you actually did that you feel helped you accomplish that improvement.
Well, thanks, Wally. I would first start by saying congratulations, Sami. That's a great accomplishment for your crew in your first year with the Six. And yeah, I've heard some great reports. I was chatting actually with Brent yesterday, and he was excited to be at that game. And one of the things he was expressing, his daughter plays on my team, and he was expressing at how physical the play was, and
Both
seeing
the refs put their whistles away right away. I mean,
yeah.
no, everybody on this call knows in women's hockey that you never know what you're going to get in reffing, and there could have been 5 penalties a period. There could have been 0, and they ended up with the 0. There probably could have been 10 penalties a period. But
Yeah, but I think in a really good way, Sami, like a lot of the quote unquote hits that many people would consider hits were of a good sort of incidental. Like I thought their game was really well refereed. Like
I agree. You just never know if you're going to get that, right?
Yeah,
so it made for very entertaining hockey, but I can imagine that Brent was probably like, whoa, these are some big hits going on.
Yeah.
So it was good. And Wally, back to your question. Obviously, it's a blend of deliberate practice on passing and a lot of small area games work, and small area games designed for a specific outcome. We found most success with much like in the male game that a lot of scoring opportunities need to be generated from below the goal line. There are, because they take away the points very well in ours. And so that means that, yes, scissoring and those sorts of things become important too. And had some really interesting conversation with some other coaches on that as well. Kerry Bracco shared with me about his belief on cycling and how the importance of you may cycle as many as 2 times, but then the puck has to go to the net. If you end up in the endless cycle in the corner, you're not accomplishing anything. So sharing that with the kids, that you probably think if you cycle it twice, that puck needs to go to the net now, and that piece. With the scissoring, it was Mark Howell talking about the importance of both the D and the forward figuring out as the forward is coming up the wall or the puck transitions of who's going inside, who's going outside, and that's got to be a really good read, whether it's scissor to the inside or scissor to the outside, and that was a real good learning piece for our kids as well. So it's teaching kids concepts, but not sticking them into X's and O's with structure. I liked what Marty St. Louis talked about, the difference between systems versus structure, or concepts versus systems. And I think that it is important that we teach them to play hockey rather than do hockey. And so it's key for me is it's about development. Yes, we're not participating in the provincial tournament this weekend coming up. We were one of the 2 hottest teams coming out of Christmas, but the team that we ran into in the playoffs was the other of the 2 hottest teams since Christmas. And our 2 styles didn't mesh very well. Well, theirs meshed very well to ours. Ours didn't mesh very well to theirs. And but I wasn't about to shorten the bench or go into a shutdown system that was something that we hadn't been playing, just for the opportunity to play a few more games. I wanted the kids to continue to play the way they'd been playing and see if they could play their way through it. One of the things that happened was the kids were playing extremely well in the first periods of each of the games, but as frustration mounted, kids went to what you were talking about, Wally, and playing 1 versus 5 hockey, where they stopped using their teammates, and that was an interesting learning piece for many of them, and the consequence was that our season is now over. So, but yeah, it was a good year of development, and I've had a lot of positive feedback from players. And Hal, I wanted to thank you for sending that letter from the third line article, because I was doing exit interviews with my players after the season here, and I asked one player that was a first year how she felt about, well, I asked all of them how they felt about their development this season, and she said, well, I thought it was really good. And she said that she never felt like she was going to lose ice time if she made a mistake, and she didn't. And she always felt like she was going to get out there and going to get the opportunity to try things. And so I kind of course, in the back of my mind is going, here you are 15 years of age and you're concerning yourself about not getting on the ice because you made a mistake. I'm sorry that you had to go through that with previous coaches, and because you should still be, it should all still be about development at this point. So, but I've been rambling along long enough, Wally. I'll let someone else.
I'm going to try to get you to ramble some more, and I will edit this, but it depends on where this goes. Jordan, you and I both know that we are working with Girls Hockey Calgary, trying to create a winning coaching atmosphere, which manages the bench really well. Everybody feels valued and wants to play. And in the course of one of your exit interviews, I don't know if you can or want to share the story by a girl who didn't have a very positive experience. And you also did mention a coach who started and have started the games. Now, I'm not sure if it's all year, but the best 2 players started. And to me, when you do that in a game, I find that, boy, that is delivering a losing message. Even though they might win the game, I'm not sure how many people really feel a part of it. Jordan?
Well, Wally, I'll share that for this group, but I won't share it. I won't have you put it on because it's too easy for people to figure out who we're talking about.
Okay, I'm marking down 48 minutes. I'm going to cut it out.
Because, yeah, I had when I was talking to the kids saying we were going to do exit interviews or exit conversations, I had one of my players go, "Oh my God," she said, "I just had a flashback." I said, "What are you talking about?" She goes, "Well," she said, "during the COVID year, my coach said we'd all have the exit conversations or exit interviews after, and we had them. And she said, he told me that I didn't develop one bit all year." She's the best player on my team and was nominated for MVP of our league this year. And I said to her, I said, "Well, I'm sorry that you had to go through that." I said, even if you didn't believe it as an adult, I said, speaking that way to, at that time, would have been a 14-year-old child. I said, you can always come up with something that that was positive. You should be able to. And I said, secondly, I said, if you don't develop during a year, a full 7 months working with someone, that means that that's on the coach as much as it is on the player. That it's the same as a classroom teacher working with students. If they don't learn through the year, it's not because of them and their learning style. Typically, it's because you and your teaching style. And so that piece, and I think Tom is going to be an important part of this with Girls Hockey Calgary too, Wally, in coming up with a way of supporting development and coaching in the right way. I think that that's going to be so important. I know that piece that you sent around about Newfoundland hockey has caused a lot of people to have some pretty good conversations, and I think that that's a good starting point. No, we don't want to create parents with stopwatches, and as Hal showed with that letter, that's 23 years ago. Well, when I played midget hockey, and that's over 23 years ago, there were parents in the stands with stopwatches then, and so it's one of those things that we'll be continuing to work on, and hopefully, as we develop these players as good humans and they come back and give back to the game, that they'll do it in the right way too.
Jordan, Mike Johnson always used to say, it's always stuck with me, if there's no learning going on, there's no teaching going on.
Yeah. That's there was a cartoon that I saw a long time ago, and it was a boy standing beside his dog, and another boy comes up and he goes, "I taught my dog to whistle," and the other boy said, "Well, okay." And the dog just sitting there, and the other boy goes, "Well, I guess he didn't learn it."
Mm.
The difference between teaching and learning.
Well, I just want to mention Tom is moving up to the Madam AAA level. So those U13 kids, Tom, I found this year, your team, everybody they played together, the chemistry of the team, and that includes the parents. Going to lunch between games with Cassie at Cassie and Brad's restaurant bar, it was just a lot of energy. Of course, it helps that you're winning, but that's a product of the way you do things. And there's no parents in those stands there with stopwatches. I was up there and enjoyed being up there, and they enjoyed being together. So you've created a really positive hockey environment there, and I just hope we can, influence girls hockey in Calgary for the better and the long term, so that what we do is we just want to prepare people to do things better as they move forward and improve things. So good on you, Tom, and Jordan, congratulations. Sami, I did have a question here about your role as a manager and sort of your whole role as a player, a goalie, an athlete, growing up, national team. Now here you are with daughters playing minor hockey. I had so many questions wanting to ask you about your daughter's minor hockey experience and what's going on there, and what could be better, and what might we do, and how the heck did you manage your schedule? So you take it anywhere you want, Sami. I'm curious about your story in terms of where you are right now, doing what you're doing right now.
So let's start with the Squishmallows, because I love talking about that team. Billy and I coached the Squishmallows, and the nice thing was that their games, practices, the nice thing for my schedule was they were 8 in the morning, 9 in the morning, every Saturday and Sunday. Terrible, I think, for introducing people to hockey. If you're going to have this is house league, this is their first entry point. And put those kids at, 10, 11. So it's really great for the parents. So they have like this amazing experience too. So needless to say, I was a little distraught that is where they have put that, those new people. When Billy and I were selecting the team, selecting in House League, they rank players, and we had nothing to do with the ranking. We didn't want to even really do that. We just went through the stands and picked what we thought were the most chill parents, and anybody that looked like they were new to Canada. So we wanted to create that first touch point for hockey to be really great for these kids. And so I think in the end, we won only one game all year, but we did break a couple records. We scored 1 goal, and then when we scored 2 goals, the girls were so excited that we broke the record and scored 2 goals. We implemented a champion circle at the end of every game. I think that came from Hal. That was just incredible and so powerful for the girls. We played in 2 tournaments. I think things really changed when we went from half ice to full ice. I could really see that it became about the outliers at that point. It became about the kid that can just carry the puck and go and score. And we had a few of those, but every other team had a few of those. It was less about kids getting to touch the puck and doing things. But they did learn other things about positions and how to. We implemented a lot of Kim McCullough's things when she talked to the Sharks. So we did the train tracks down the middle. We tried to have animals that were on the hunt, so getting somebody in there, but having some support, those kind of things that I heard from a lot of the Sharks. So that was really great. I just think in the end, the team itself, when we were at these tournaments, would go to play places and all play together, and the parents would hang out. And at the end of the day, that's what hockey should be about. It was an incredible experience for me. My husband hated it because he hates waking up early. And he had a lot of terrible experience. I mean, he had a really great experience with the kids. Don't get me wrong. He loved the kids, but he had 3 rinks that were inaccessible for him, which is just never a fun experience. So he couldn't be on the bench with us because he couldn't get his wheelchair around. So that was sort of hard to see, but he filmed one of them, and it has changed sort of the landscape for accessibility here in Mississauga and Oakville. So that's good. He's had a lot of conversations from there. I think for him playing at the national team level, you think you're playing in the best ranks and you're treated in the best way, but the reality is for most kids with disabilities, when they come into the game, it's this experience. So things change there. But I think for these kids to see him on the ice and to see him, just participating with them and playing tag and all that in a sled, I think was so powerful. My assistant coach, she's nearing 70. This was her first time ever coaching, and she's always wanted to and never coached. And she started rec hockey when she was 50, and she's like, I'm not sure if I could do it. I said, you have, 27 years of experience. Like you're going to be better than the 7-year-olds. So I think you can do it. And so, I just think the whole thing was really powerful. And then the Squishmallows got to play between periods for the Toronto Six, and they thought that they had made the big time, like they've never played in front of that many crowd. Most of them didn't watch the game. They got popcorn and cotton candy, and then getting the autographs from the girls at the end. I mean, that was so powerful. Seeing these girls look at the big girls, that was amazing. So overall, Wally, I'd say my experience for me, I absolutely loved it. I'm not sure I can convince my husband to do it again, just because of the experiences that he had and the early mornings. And, my daughter came to like it, I would say. She really loved her friends, and she had a lot of play dates afterwards. It was early to get, like every parent on this call has been through that, where you're dressing the kid at 6:30 in the morning and trying to get them awake and to the rink. So she didn't love that part of it, but she certainly loved the tournaments, and that was really fun. So overall, I would so love to do it again. I mean, I just don't know that I can convince the rest of my family to do it again. So it took a lot of time away. If I was doing that separately from what I do with the Toronto Six, it would be hard to do in the same time. But I think, presidential duties, there's just a lot of work there. So Anyways, first question is about the Squishmallows, which I love talking about them. Any questions on that, Wally? Oh, you're on mute.
You brought up so many interesting points that people don't think of. The starting time of a practice for kids when it's most important to build a love for the experience. And what you've taken away from the Sharks and applied with your kids, the train tracks, the stuffed animals on the ice, and the using the animals in terms for forechecking, what kind of animals they were going to be. And then your husband's inaccessibility in some arenas, which is, it's just great that you're doing what you're doing, where you're doing it. And I hope he tries to stick with it. And I hope the kids continue to play hockey, but they may change, who knows? It's just that the adult environment that we create is going to determine whether it's a positive experience or a negative experience. And I know that anything, Sami, you're ever involved in is going to be a positive experience. And it's called win-win coaching and win-win rearing, parenting, managing, the whole thing. So
well, that's very kind, Wally. I feel like I learned from the best. I learned from you. I learned from this group, and there's lots of times where I check myself, and I think, what would the Sharks do? So I appreciate all of you guys.
Well, I'm so glad you got down to Arizona and run into Tim and Brent Dodging Horse. And Brent, he listens to all the sessions, so I'm sure he'll be calling to talk about it. And I want to welcome Peter Whitney. Now, Peter, have you met Sami?
Yes, we've been on calls together before.
Okay, I'm just not sure. I've lost track of who's been on and when. But last week, Peter stayed on a while, and he got talking about COVID and the things he did that had not having as much of an opportunity to practice as you would like on ice, but what he did outside of the X's and O's of the game with the group to create a real healthy culture that's had an impact on improving the outcome of the season. So, Peter, I hope you can get on another session early, or we can set a time where we can dedicate you to it. But right now, I just like you to tell me your story, the age level you were coaching at the time, and that would be when COVID kicked in, and then go there, because my purpose in this is that the X's and O's aren't as important. They matter, but we overdo it. You'll interfere with their playing of the game. So go ahead, Peter.
Sure, and I agree with you. Well, I think one thing I did learn out of this was the X's and O's are important, but they, especially with that COVID year, they pale in comparison to everything else that actually became a priority in that year. Because for us, we finished our year, and then we found out mid-March that we were shutting it down. So all the students on campus, athletes, non-athletes, all went home. And we were supposed to come back. The hope was in October of 2020, which did not happen, which was pretty devastating, because all summer that was sort of what the plan was, that we were going to do that, and there were things in place we were going to try. But then the school decided that it wouldn't do that, and they went remote. So the story kind of starts with that on the 19th, when we were told that we were not coming back. And I had my own little come to Jesus moment, if you will. And okay, so what are we going to do now? So first thing I did was I met with my staff, and we came up with a plan, because my thought process was, what I needed to do was I needed to recreate, without practices and without games, what a year in the life of that student athlete would be if they were on campus, but we weren't practicing and we weren't playing. So we did many things. We had meetings 2 to 3 times a week, Zoom meetings. And we thought we would meet with our seniors. We met with our seniors to discuss what our plan was, to get buy-in from them. And once we did that, we began to come up with some different ideas. Everything from, first off, looking at the players that still had some junior eligibility to see if that was a path that they wanted to follow, because the junior leagues were still going. They were still playing. We had one player who took a semester off because they were going to get done a semester early, and this way, by taking a semester off, they could finish the whole year with us, which was great. So the first thing we did was we split everybody up into 5 different groups, and we had a group leader. And the first exercise we did was, we're going to meet in a week, and we gave them a list of questions, and they were really all over the pike, from your favorite team, your favorite ice cream, your favorite restaurant, whatever that may be. And what we did was, I wanted to find a way to continue to have some measure of competition. So we split them up into 5 groups, and we would have an ultimate winner out of that. So the leader of the group was responsible for getting to know everybody else, to sort of steer the ship in that way. So I would just ask them the questions, or I'd pick randomly. I might pick, Sammy Joe, what's your favorite restaurant? And he had to know what that person's favorite restaurant was, and so on and so forth. And then we scored points for that kind of thing. And like I said, the whole idea was to try to start to feed the need the players naturally have for some kind of competition, something that would get them involved, that there was some measure of, hey, I'm winning, or I'm moving forward in some ways. And then our team activities that we began, we did everything from, we did an ice hockey Jeopardy, we did a name your favorite NHL player and why. We actually, and this is one of my assistants did this, and God bless him for his ability to know technology. We did a virtual escape room, where they were timed on when they could get out of the escape room. So we did that. Then we did, some real laid back stuff like tell your favorite joke, which it's funny in the sense of, not the joke, because a lot of the jokes really weren't funny, but in terms of getting out in front of a group and speaking. So we worked on a little public speaking without them even knowing that. And the other thing that the guys did, which was great, was they took turns creating a challenge. So it might be 10 push-ups, jump up, 10 shots, 10 push-ups, three rounds of that in 60 seconds. And what they did was, every player videotaped themselves doing it so they could send it in, and we would look at it as a group. So 2 things, it held them accountable, so there's an accountability factor with this, and there was also kind of a compete factor with it, because guys were trying to do that group of 3 and 3, right, reps in less than a minute. And probably one of the most impactful ones, we had one boy who, his family lived in an apartment, because most of these guys had like basements or garages where they could do this. But one of the most impactful things was his video, which he sent in, which he did that exercise in the rain. He went outside in the sidewalk in the rain, set up his phone, and videotaped himself in the rain doing it, because he was going to do it. He was going to find a way to do it. And that honestly was pretty impactful in and of itself. And we talked about that for a while, about all these things that you're doing and how they're going to help us, and how we're going to be able to move forward with that. Then we went through the whole process of 50-year seniors, right? Who's going to come back, who's not going to come back. And we actually had 10 of 14 guys decide they were going to come back, which I think also, obviously, having those veterans helped us quite a bit in our move in the playoffs there. Then we did some things like we did a Secret Santa, which was kind of fun, because we got one of our assistant coaches who was, you wouldn't really think he would be Santa Claus, but I quote unquote made him put on a Santa suit, and he was Santa Claus. He did the virtual Santa in his Santa suit from his restaurant with his glasses and all, and it was it was really a lot of fun, and the guys enjoyed the fact more that I got him to put on a Santa suit than the actual Secret Santa piece, I think. And then, it began. Now it's after Christmas, so just like we would normally do, there's a little bit of break at Christmas, so you're with your families, and we'll pick back up after that Christmas break, which we did. With that, we began what I call our speaker series. And we had everything from, I had a player who played for me in prep school who was a D1 player, played in the East Coast League. Then he became a coach. He's now a coach in the East Coast League. He talked about his journey with the boys and what his path was, because guys are interested in that. We had a strength and conditioning coach from the Utica Comets on, who talked about that piece and how important that was. Even though you're not playing right now, what can you do to continue to put yourself in the best position? Because when it's time to go back to school in the fall, you're not going to start that summer because it's going to be too late. And a lot of these topics were topics that the boys came up with. So another one that we had was again, a former player who was as an investment banker. So he talked about, life after hockey and possibilities and ways to sort of begin to save and have some money for yourself in that way. Had a sports psychologist on, had an author on who has written books about hockey and success, and coached overseas and did quite a bit with the Hispanics group. I think he worked with, it was Team Puerto Rico that he worked with. He coached them. And then of course, a lot of questions about what's going on, in the fall. I did a review with the guys too about what they liked. What did you like that we did? We did our end of season stuff. And then honestly, before you knew it, it was May. And then we backed off like we normally would on the guys for a few weeks. And then we would have our weekly conversations during the summer. And the whole idea was, we tried to engage these guys, emulate what the season would be like without a practice, without a game, but make them feel that they were part of it and get to know each other. And I really think that was a big part. Like I told you before, Wally, we were a team that coming back into that year in 2021. I mean, we were picked to finish 7th, which doesn't sound so bad unless you realize there's only 7 teams in the league. And we finished 4th and went to the championship game and fell a little bit short there. But I really think it had very little to do with the X's and O's that we did, and much more to do with what we did that year prior. That's kind of the Cliff's Note version of it.
Mike.
During COVID, I had a midget AA coach reach out to me and find out, share what he was doing with his midget AA team. So I have to bring this up because it's just an ingenious idea. At the end of the season, the parents said it was the best season ever, probably because of this activity. There was the very first time they did it on a Zoom call, the head coach was the chef. Everybody got the recipe and had to do the grocery shopping. And they Zoomed while the kids cooked for their parents during the Zoom call. And the coach did the first one. The parents usually sat and had a glass of wine and observed while their kids with their aprons on and in the kitchen. And that was the first one. But every player on the team had to initiate that particular activity. I was blown away by it. In fact, I think I might have put one of those sessions onto my site, but I thought that was brilliant. Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, first off, did you get the recipe?
Well, the coach's recipe was one thing. Every player's recipe was different.
Okay, all right.
And so
It's your choice.
the next week, a different player had to decide. I'm sure got help from the parents and do the shopping, and everybody was involved. The parents were involved. It was a weekly supper cooked by the kids who, how much time do they spend with their parents? Have they ever cooked for their parents? So when you look at the dynamics of that, just like the dynamics of every one of your activity and what they accomplish in creating a bond.
Yeah, the one thing I did leave out that we did that was a really good activity was we, with those 5 groups, we created a third jersey. And so that took about 5 weeks for them to, each individual in their group came up with one, then they voted on it within their group. Then it was brought to everyone to vote it down to 3, then finally down to 2, and finally down to 1. And that was actually the third jersey that we produced. But every time they put on that jersey, I see that as symbolic of what we did. And, I retired at the end of that year. And I always think back that if I was still coaching, and probably any team, but that team for sure, I would do a lot of those same activities whenever I could during the season, especially during the summer, because I think that was a difference maker in bringing the guys together.
Peter, I agree with you. I think a once a week something else can be given up for an ice time or a fitness session. And that's the whole point I wanted you to come on, is that we are driven to have more ice time, more practices, more drills, all X's and O's, compete. And it doesn't matter what you do in that regard relative to the feelings of the players for one another to commit to being a team. So excellent. Now,
Yeah,
Sam, I think you're writing down some ideas, and you're probably going to experiment with them.
Right at the end of the day, and Sammy Joe, you probably see this because you're involved in such a high level. The whole idea that talent without a positive culture always underachieves. I mean, it's rare you can get that super team that it doesn't matter if nobody gets along, they don't like each other, they're just that good. But that's more rare. But really, talent without positive culture, that team just typically underachieves.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to share one story. I've been trying to get Scott Rivet on from Mount Royal, but something he did, and I'm not sure, Tom, if it was during COVID or not, but he created, similar to you, he had 5 teams of maybe 4 kids or 6 of 4 female athletes and study groups. And they created those groupings based on schedules and fitting them in, and they looked after each other in terms of academics, following up, raising the bar academically, and they competed to see who made the most progress. And they won the national championship this year. And I really think that kind of an activity, the student athlete, the focus on what you're doing and why you're doing it, and then competing at the highest level, that activity contributes to the result. And for him, you can't do much more. You got the result, and it's what you do to get the result. So the process of activities that you did then and the outcomes that resulted for you and for Scott and for Sami, I'm not sure, Sami, at your group, how much the X's and O's played a part in the end result, or how much the cultural things that you might have done as a group got the result. But
the first time that I had a conversation really with Danielle Sauvageau was for my book. And, you know, I had written it in a certain perspective, and she was really great about it. And who was the first person to well, congratulate me after we won, but also, you know, called me up before we left. And this was Danielle Sauvageau, and even texted between the second and third period and said, you know, you need to get your team to score. So it's amazing how 20 years later the perspective can change, and you can see the person for who they are and what they attempted to do, and not for the influence they had on your playing. And that's really hard as a player to separate. You play or you don't play. You like the coach or you don't like the coach. And that's hard to sort of separate the two. So I think that 20 years later, I appreciate so much what she was able to build, what she was able to push for, and what she was, you know, wanting to do for our program. And I think that it shouldn't take that long for people to gain that perspective. And so I really push, you know, I push everybody now to have those tough conversations, because you'll realize that they're just a human on the other side, just like you, that's trying to do their best as well. So that's not always easy for those of us that can be stubborn at times, such as myself. But I'm glad I had to have those conversations. You know, I think that writing the book, that really made a big difference. I reached out to both Mel and Danielle to make sure that they were okay with what I said about them. And that, you know, that was my perspective at the time, but that doesn't mean that that's my perspective now by any means. And both I have really great relationships with both Mel and Danielle. And I would say they are probably my biggest champions, which is really, I mean, is a testament to them, not to me at all. I mean, that's to their ability to just see the athlete for their growth and development, and to understand that they had to make tough decisions. I could go on and on, but it is 12:30, so people are allowed to have other lives.
I'm assuming it was a bit tongue-in-cheek, Danielle's sage advice to get your team to score when you're down 3-2. Very good advice.
Very good advice. Like, I could do anything from up in the press box, right?
Yeah. And it was a hell of a game-winning goal too. Like, Wally, if you didn't see the game, if you haven't seen it, you should. I imagine it's on YouTube somewhere or wherever. But it was a hell of a game-winning goal. And the 3-on-3 in overtime was fantastic to watch.
Oh, it was spectacular. Doing 3-on-3 with a long change, I just think makes for such incredible moments, right? I mean, there's breakaways, there's giveaways, there's you know, you're trying to possess the puck. We did not dominate the game, but I think we dominated the overtime. We had some huge chances.
Very fair observation. Like, the game was pretty evenly played. I might even say Minnesota might have had a slight edge.
Yeah.
But you guys for sure dominated the overtime. Absolutely.
But that's where one giveaway and the other team scores, and then you're, you know.
Yeah. And I wasn't watching your bench in particular, but I do know that I would have an opinion on who the two best players in Minnesota were, and one of them played way too much to be effective in that 3-on-3 in overtime.
Snodgrass, probably.
He was toast in overtime.
Yeah, that's the one. I'll give Geraldine credit. She, throughout the game, played our fourth line quite a significant amount, so that when it was time, those girls were rested and ready to go. So that was nice to see. And that's one thing I'll give her credit for the whole year, is that she, you know, she did play who she dressed. She didn't often, you know, same girls sat out a lot, but who got dressed often played. So that was good.
Yeah.
I also found it interesting, the Minnesota started their top 3 players, like their national team players. And Geraldine started more of a, I would say, what would be a secondary, more defensive crew. So that was an interesting take too for the 3-on-3. Anyways.
Yeah, it was a fun overtime. How long did it? It was about 5 minutes, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it ended up being about 6 or 7, but it was, yeah. They allotted for 20 minutes, which normally those are done in 3 minutes. I mean, they're so quick usually for the first goal. But like you saw, Tim, there was some huge saves on both sides, and just, back and forth.
Yeah. It was. You should watch it, Wally. Try to find the overtime even. Just watch the overtime.
Well, You could believe I'm too busy watching Netflix.
Is it on the PHF website, Sammy? Do you know?
So it was on TSN. So it's probably available in the archives on TSN still. I'll see if I can get it though.
Yeah.
We get Instat usually a couple days later, and so I can probably share it with Wally on Instat.
Please do that, Sami.
Okay.
I had a question here, and I want to bring us minor hockey league guys back into the perspective fold here. And I'm curious about Geraldine. You said she started the defensive players because they started the offensive players, right?
I don't know if it was because. That's the thing. I don't know if it was conscious or that just was the way she felt like. I mean, they were still offensive players, don't get me wrong, but they weren't our top 3 scorers, for instance.
Well, the question I want to ask is that it's philosophy of coaching. And Rick and Tom, I'm asking you this question in hell. Every period, do you start a different line? And are you aware of the other team starting a line? And I know in Tom's case, I believe who's ever up is going. And Tom's were 5-minute breaks, not 20-minute breaks. But the effect of who you start every period and the creation of that internal hierarchy, I'm really pleased to hear that Geraldine knew how to manage her bench, used her 4th line to get an income. It is professional hockey.
We shouldn't assume we know what she was thinking or doing because, you know, you
Well,
never
that's
know.
why we'll have to have her on here and ask her. Yeah.
But we can ask her. So
Yeah.
when she gets on, like I'm curious about the season, and if you even Sami as a manager looked at which line's starting, is it a different line? Are they trying to create this synergy as a team, or are they trying to win just that game through coaching in the short term? And Rick, I'm coming back to you. Midget AAA hockey, you've been successful. How can you, what did you do in terms of starting lines every period and every game?
I was well aware after time, Wally, that people would read things into the starting lineup. So I made a practice of changing it virtually for every period, every game, so as to not give them that opportunity to nitpick. And again, I don't pay or didn't pay much attention to what the other team was doing in terms of their starters. Somebody gave me some good advice back before mentoring was even a word when I started coaching was don't worry about what the other team is doing. Worry about what you're able to get your team to do. Focus on that. And if you're doing a good job and they're doing a good job, things will likely work out.
Wally, I've said this before, but it's a perfect opportunity. We're talking about, sharing the starting load. And, I can't remember when I first stumbled on this, probably at University of Vermont. And we had a team that really struggled to compete. But one of the things that was important to us as a group, and we did this at U of C with Danielle as well, on occasion at least, is we would mix up the starters. But it was so important to the team to get off to a good start. Like I always, as a coach, really loved it when we won the opening face-off and we managed to make a pass or two and get it in deep to get on the forecheck right away. So if we started Rick Puttick's line in game 1, and now Rick won the face-off, and then it's a team, so it's not enough just to win the face-off. You got to actually get the puck over the red line and get it in. And if Rick's line and the group of 5 did that, they got to start the next period. And it was a powerful motivator, especially in the female game. And the girls on the bench actually, even though they knew they wouldn't get to start the next period, they were actually excited and cheered if somebody won the opening face-off of a period. and made a pass or two, got it over, got it in deep, and it was a real point of focus. So that way you can reward good behavior, and of course, you're not always going to win the faceoff. You're not always going to get it over and get it deep. So then you end up mixing your starters, and the players are empowered. If they can do that every time, they're going to start every time, and everybody respects the fact that, hey, this is how you get to start the period or the game or whatever. So it's worked. And good job winning.
I've never thought of that. Makes absolute sense, Tim. Great move to do that. Did you guys come up with it together, or?
I forget what the genesis of it was, but I know it stemmed from the fact that, at Vermont, we struggled to compete, and we got better every year, but it always made me feel good if we could win the face-off and get it deep, and we're off to a good start in a period or a game, and it's like, hey, let's make that a real focus. And so that's how it came about. I don't actually remember if it was totally my idea or, Aunt or Emily or Mike at UVM. I'm not sure.
Tim, you've coached at every level, and I'm thinking Western Hockey League. Now, I don't know if you've coached youth hockey enough.
No.
And I call midget AAA youth hockey and competitive hockey.
Agreed.
But at what point does this starting lineup and how you use lines become a part of the psychology of coaching? Is it always part, or is it in professional hockey only? Major, junior, that it doesn't matter? Or what did you do coaching the college university team, men's team, the Western Hockey League team? What did your head coach do relative to the NHL team? So I think the NHL, I'm assuming, it doesn't matter. Or does it?
What do you mean it doesn't matter, Wally?
Well, I don't know. I think they're pros. They're expected to cope with whatever the coach does, and that's it.
You mean it doesn't matter from the player's perspective that the same line is starting every whatever.
Yeah,
from
yeah.
The player's perspective.
It shouldn't matter because they're being paid enough to take it, tolerate it. I don't know. I'm just asking because, like Rick said, he heard and he knew that this is the way they do things, but he didn't do it that way. And I just consciously make an effort to start a different line every period. I don't look at, and I really like the idea, Tim, of rewarding the first shift, like Scotty Bowman will record you scored a goal, your line, where you had a tremendous shift, you sit a shift and you're going back out again. I mean, that's
part of the art of coaching.
Yeah, that's the art of coaching. So this is what I'm sort of curious about, Tim. And
sorry.
Go ahead.
I would have a couple of observations. Number one, I think it does matter to players at the NHL level even, but to your point, they're being paid and they're professional and they just deal with it. But I think we'd be selling them short to some degree to say, hey, that fourth line player or the third line player, that if they never get to start a game, it does matter to them. And a lot of NHL coaches do start those lines for the energy perspective. But I think that whole thing starts at a very, very young age, as soon as players are able to recognize the differentiation in talent levels, and for sure, who starts and who doesn't. Starts at a very, very young age.
Rick, anything to add related to starters and the different levels of coaching and your thoughts?
Yeah, as I stated earlier, Wally, I learned.
Oh, now you're breaking up, Rick.
Was that all right? I learned that it's important to the group as a whole. One of the first things they ask you is who's starting. So I would post it on the board eventually. As you know, I'm talking from the time when there were no rink boards in the rooms to making my own lineup sheet. But yeah, I would post it so that they would know that question would be answered by the time they came into the room. Secondly, I learned to start different people at different times because there was emphasis outside the dressing room, outside the locker room as to who you're favoring based on who you're starting. So I made a point of starting everybody from time, not in a rotation necessarily, but we moved it around enough that it was obvious that there was no real set pattern here. There was no real set bias. Just one of the ways of managing the group within the group and the group without the group, outside of the group, trying to keep everybody on a level plane. As far as what you're starting or who you're putting out in the middle of a game, depending upon game circumstance, I don't know what's the best time to do that. As far as I can recall, I was doing that quite early in my coaching involvement. Depending upon what had happened on the ice, you may want to move a group out of rotation. And it also oriented the players to the idea that there was no 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 continuous loop, that things were going to change as the game changed, because that's the game. It changes and you need to adjust and adapt as you go. And even at a young age level, I don't think it's too early to introduce that. Don't make a big deal out of it. Don't do it to excess, but put it in their heads that this is part and parcel of what you're involved in here.
It's a really what's the best word? Vivid, noticeable statement of belief or lack of belief if you never start a particular line. You're sending a message, and you might think it's not important, but if line number 3 never starts a game, you're telling them you're not capable of starting a game. It's a statement of belief, and it's really important one. I definitely have, in my experience, worked with or observed coaches who, start the same line every single game, and it sends a pretty interesting and really not very productive message to the rest of the group. And I've been certainly guilty at different times in my career of just having that, I got to start them again because they're our best group, but it's not a good practice at all from my seat and our seat, I guess, our seat.
Tom, when you coached State men and State women and Mount Royal women, what was your philosophy of starting lines each game and each period?
Well, it's different at the higher levels because you get the other team, like if you're home team, you get the other team's starting line. Where I just coached, that you don't have to put your starting lineup on. In minor hockey, you used to have to do that too. So I'd focus more on what D was going to start if I was going to make that choice, because I think that's always kind of be my focus, is you match D's more than you match forward lines.
Yeah.
So,
but then you got to be aware of the same thing. Then number 5 and number 6D are thinking the same thing. Oh, Tom doesn't believe in me.
Yeah, but didn't do it all the time. And this is like, if we're playing Nate when they won like 50 in a row, the Damiot was on the ice. I didn't want them scoring first shift because remember U of A used to do that to us. Say the first 10 minutes of a game, they pinch so much that they get a 2-goal lead the first 10 minutes. That was kind of their MO. So, against really good teams, but you don't always play really good teams. So the next game you might be playing somebody that's even with you, and it doesn't really matter who you start. So
But
you
then-
have to be conscious
It's
of.
not the same if it doesn't, I mean, the players know all these things.
Oh,
Of
yeah.
course, so we have to be aware of them as coaches. Like the players, you know, they'll ferret that out. Oh, well, you know, I never start against Nate, or I always start against, you know, the team at the bottom of the league. They figure that stuff out. So you just
Yeah.
got to be really.
I think also they expect you to make the right decision too. So it's kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other, right?
Yeah,
You know, if you got a third pair that's terrible and you start them and you're behind 1-0 right away, the players are thinking, what the hell? So, you know, it's not always black and white,
certainly not.
you know.
And then especially on the
You don't
female,
want to start the same players all the time. I think we all agree on that one.
yeah, you got to find your ways to, you know, mix it up a bit. Anyway, I got to run, guys. I'm really glad I jumped on. I can't wait to get Geraldine on. Wally, it'd be really, really interesting, I think. Really interesting. And then Angela, too, would be another good. And we still got to get Courtney Burchard on as well. May will work best for her because basically it's the shutdown month in the NCAA where they can't do any recruiting, so they're forced to actually take some time off.
Well, the only I'm glad Peter got on today because I really wanted him to talk those cultural team building activities that he did during COVID, and I have reached out to Scott Rivet, having won the national championship. He's the only person I've got immediately in mind about coming on, but Tim, by all means, if you can get anybody on, you had Cavallini in your mindset. NHL playoffs are coming up. I think you guys have anybody that you know that would be able to, kickstart whatever we do, whatever direction we go. I'd sure appreciate that. I had no idea. I just knew Sami Joe was going to be on today. I asked Peter if he could get on and be the guest this week, and he didn't get on till later, so it all worked out really well. And Sami just validated my thought that the NHL team that hires one female on the bench is going to be adding value to that side of coaching. And Sami proved it. I mean, she's just brilliant. And how she's managed that situation relative to her team and communicating, being the conduit between the coaches and the players, and she's still following up on it. She's doing a hell of a job. I think it's more than waiting and talking to a player for 5 seconds in the hallway. And I think I'm really glad she's back on, and hopefully we can get her on again. And I hope she sends me the game. I didn't watch it, but I certainly will if I do get it. So